Hello and good evening, everyone. Once again, thank you for joining this session number 4 on how to write UCAS personal statement. So you just went through 2 sessions where you saw what the application process looks like and how to fill your UCAS. Now, the final session for the evening is where you'll see these 2 very experienced speakers tell you about what is it that makes a UCAS personal statement fantastic, right? What makes it stand out. Joining us today, we have Shonag Mark from the University of Glasgow and Devesh Anand from the University of Bristol. It's a pleasure to have both of you here today, and we are looking forward to learning about writing the UCAS personal statement. So over to you now, and thank you for joining. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for inviting us here, and pleased to be able to give you a bit of an overview on what makes an effective personal statement. I know it's something that causes a lot of stress and anxiety, and it can be quite a hard thing to actually just to think about what to include in it, and to actually write about yourself is sometimes the hardest thing to do. So we're going to give you hopefully some ideas about what to include and what not to include. Before we do that, I had just started to give you a little bit of an introduction to the University of Glasgow. So if we move on to the next slide, it gives you just a little bit of an idea about the university itself. Apologies, that's the agenda of what we're going to run through today very quickly. We'll give you a bit of an overview of our 2 universities. So the University of Glasgow, we're one of the largest universities here in the UK, so that number's actually jumped up a little bit. We've now got just over 30,000 students from over 140 different countries. We're consistently ranked as one of the top 100 universities in the world, and rankings are an interesting thing. I always say to students, don't just look at one ranking table and don't just make a decision based on rankings. Look for universities that perform well across a number of different ranking tables, and look at the subject that you're looking to study as well as the overall university ranking. But also make sure that you're considering things like, the style of university, is it a campus or a city? All of those things are also important to take into account when you're looking at rankings about a university as well. As we remember, both of our universities are members of the Russell Group, which is often compared to the Ivy League or the Group of 8 universities in Australia. And what that means is we are a research-intensive group of universities. And you might be thinking, why is that important to me as an undergraduate student? I'm not going to be looking at research, but actually our research informs what we teach. So what that means is by coming to a Russell Group and studying at a research-intensive research leading university, what you're being taught is actually completely up to date and informed by the most cutting edge research that our academics are undertaking as well. I'm going to pass you over to Devesh, who'll give you a bit of an overview about his university, and then we'll talk you through some of the personal statement stuff as well.
Thank you so much, Shauna, and thank you, Devesh, for having us as well, and thank you everyone for joining us for the session today. I'm Devesh and I represent the University of Bristol. Bristol as a university is quite highly ranked and regarded. It's ranked 62nd in the world currently as part of the 2022 ranking. And it's also top 10 in the UK in terms of its ranking. We are located in the city of Bristol, which is in the southwest of England. And the city itself is a prominent economic hub. Very good for aerospace engineering, wherein we have big companies like Airbus, Rolls-Royce, Augusta-Westland, regular collaborators of the university as well. The university is also very prominently known for its employability. So we are top 4 in the UK in terms of being targeted by top employers, including across the board employers like Rolls-Royce, JP Morgan, KPMG, and Apple. It's also a university that's a tradition with edge. What we do with that is that though we are very traditional at heart, but we are also very modern in our approach. So this was the first university, which in fact was launched in 1876. Was the first one to admit men and women on an equal basis into its campuses. So that just shows that the university is a very forward thinking, but at the heart of it, it still keeps its traditions alive. We also are very proud that we have the university's business incubator, in fact, the world's best university business incubator called Set Squared in the city of Bristol itself. And that has led to a lot of startups, including IMDb, which is a Bristol startup. So many students who come up with innovative ideas during their course, it could be from any domain, can approach the university, and we will help you facilitate an introduction with the venture capitalists. And if they like your idea, you could be starting off your own entrepreneurial journey as well. So that's a small brief about the University of Bristol. And now moving on to the topic of the day. So we are talking about how to make your university application stand out with your person statement. The first thing is, what exactly is a person statement, and what is the importance of the statement? Now, a person statement is the only component of your application that actually makes it really stand out in the eyes of an admissions tutor. Of course, we have your grades that we go by, but when you see it from the point of view of an admissions person who's looking at about 100 applications a day, there are things that they're looking for which make an application look more human as compared to something that's just quantitative in terms of grades. So this is your one chance to write something unique about yourself, which is going to stay in the mind of that admission tutor, and then go ahead and give you an offer to come and study at the university. Now, when we look at the person statement, of course, what are you looking at covering? You are going to be applying through UCAS. So in the UK, you heard in the previous sessions that you're applying through a system called UCAS and applying to 5 universities simultaneously with one application. So that's why we want to know, why are you applying for this subject? What is it about the subject that really interests you? And what activities have you done at that level to gain further knowledge or interest about that subject? Second is also what makes you suitable. Now, every university has different requirements, and you, of course, have the challenge of writing a common application that goes ahead and answers the queries of these universities. But when you're shortlisting a university, many of the top ranked universities like Bristol as well as Glasgow will be looking for key things that stand out in an application, especially linked to your subject. So if you're looking at applying for engineering courses, we're looking for very good research orientation, very good analytical skills. If you're applying for a degree in law, we're looking for good communication skills. If you're applying for a management course, we're looking for your communication, team working skills. So these are things that you really have to highlight in your application, whether it is through academic means or through your extracurriculars. So that's what will make a very good person statement. Now, why does it matter? The key thing about UK, especially for top league universities like Shauna mentioned, both Bristol and Glasgow are selective universities. So what happens with this is that you could be competing for a spot. For example, 7 to 10 students could be competing for that one seat. Now, when it becomes so difficult for a university to choose the right candidate, we are looking for the application to stand out. We will, of course, factor in your grades, but what makes your application stand out when we have a few seats and a large pool of applicants? So that is where your person statement plays a very important and crucial role. Also, sometimes it also helps you in terms of scholarships, especially when faculties are looking at giving subject-specific awards. They will also look at your person statement to see how motivated you are towards that subject, and that could help you there as well. We also want to know who the person is behind the grades. So when we look at a grade sheet, we do see the marks. It could be A levels, it could be IB, and you score very well. But who's the person behind it, and what is the personality of that person? So that is the chance for you to bring that out in your person statement. The courses can be quite competitive as well. Like I mentioned, there could be high number of applications for a single seat, and that's where you have to make it stand out. And also with regards to your academic profiles, many of the students would have studied similar subjects. You could be getting the similar gradings, but what separates one student from the another is that you can show an interest in an activity. Have you gone ahead and met somebody from the same profession? Like, for example, if you're applying for management, have you met a management professional or taken the interest to go and meet one and explore what kind of a job profile do they have? Have you met aerospace engineer, in case you're wanting to study aerospace engineering, and see what is it that their day-to-day activity compiles, and will you be happy doing such a similar job for the rest of your life? So these are things that really we want you to explore, and that has to come out in your statement as well. In terms of the structure, what we're looking for is 80-20 split. So 80 is going to be subject specific because you're applying for a course at a university, and the same application is going to 5 universities. The only common factor is the subjects that you've applied for in those universities. Of course, there could be some permutations, like if you're applying for economics in another university that selected economics and politics. We want to know, why are you selecting that subject? What is it about that subject that makes you really excited or want to pursue that for the next 3 or 4 years that you're going to be studying? Also, what have you done in the past that makes you suitable for the subject? Do you have the necessary grades? Now, we of course look at your academics, so we know that you've studied the right subjects, which is the basic eligibility criteria or check that we do. But apart from that, what interest have you studied in that subject? Have you read some research papers, or have you read some books or journals about that subject? In fact, students, perspective that stands out to me is one student who applied to Bristol recently for economics. And that student during the COVID period was very, very active in terms of blogging. And she had been writing about demonetization that happened in India. She wrote about the GST that was launched. Was it effective? Was it not effective? So this showed us that she's quite, research oriented, but at the same time, she's also writing about topical content. She's keeping up to date with what's happening in the environment around her, and also not just keeping the knowledge to herself, but sharing it with others as well. So these kind of things that you do, that you highlight on your statement, will make it stand out. We also look at your critical engagement within a subject of your choice. So if, like this example of economics, so, when she did write or blog, she did it for her school newsletter, but in addition to that, she was also blogging independently. So that shows us how involved she is with that subject, how deeply it touches her. And that's where she's, looking at things that involve economics in that. And again, what have you done to develop skills for your higher education? So have you taken, some internship opportunities? So there are free internships available. Try and go ahead with that. Any additional responsibilities in your school that you have taken, which have developed your skills, even your interpersonal, as well as your extracurricular activities, impart a lot of skills. So all of these will go into your content. This is a basic introduction to the personal statement and the relevance, as well as the key contents of the statement. I'll hand you over to Shauna now, who will tell you what exactly makes a good statement and what are the things that you should avoid when you're writing your statement.
Thanks, Devesh. So I'm going to take you through some do's and don'ts when completing your personal statement. And I'm also going to talk you through some examples of what makes a good statement and what makes a less good statement. So in terms of some of the things that you should do, building on what Devesh had said, is be specific. Give us examples and details of what you're talking about. So don't tell us that you are ambitious. Tell us what you've done to show that you're ambitious. Give us some examples to back up the statements that you're making. You want this to be, and this is a tricky one, you want it to be personalized without it being too personalized, because you're using one statement to apply to multiple universities. So as we mentioned in terms of the 80-20 structure, where you could really have a chance to try and personalize is through the subject area that you're applying for. And this is why your high school counsellors and sort of friends and family will sort of advise you to try and apply for subjects that are similar. It's really hard to write a personal statement if you are applying for 3 or 4 completely different subject areas to try and be able to tailor that. Again, some of the way that a lot of university courses are structured, you do have flexibility when you're at university, so you will, have the opportunity still to try different subjects, but you really need to try and personalize it and focus it in terms of the sort of overall subject area that you're interested in to be able to do the best personal statement possible. Think a lot about what you've done that shows us that evidence. So what we always say to people is, a lot of people tend to focus on what they've done in school. So they'll tell us about, their academic grades, they'll maybe tell us about awards that they've won in school, particular subjects that they've got really good grades for. And that is great, that is interesting, and it's relevant, but it's not the only thing that makes up you. We want to know more about you as a complete person. So have you had any work experience? Now, fantastic if that's related to the subject that you're applying for, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, because your part-time job, helping in your parents' restaurant, or, maybe getting some work experience in a completely different type of office, learns you skills like communication, organization. So show us some examples of where you've been able to gain skills and experience outside of the classroom, whether that's through a sport or a hobby as well. All of those things show us more about you as a more rounded person outside of your academic achievements. The next one's a very practical one. Please do use the whole space. You only get a limited number of characters to sell yourself, and make sure that you use them. And tell us what we don't already know. A lot of students use a good chunk of their personal statement to tell us what we can already see from your application. So if you've got top grades in your results, if you're forecasted top grades, you don't have to tell us that in your personal statement. We can see that from your grades. So don't waste that limited space telling us things that we don't know. The other two very practical bits of advice around what you should do is start early. It can take time to do a good personal statement, and it's not always the easiest thing to do. Ask others for feedback, and that can include things like your guidance counsellor or a teacher or a family member. But it's also worth talking, to an extent, to a friend. I always think I could tell you all the things that my friends do that they're really fantastic at, what their skills are, what their strengths are, but I'm not very good at telling you what I think I'm good at. We're generally, as a group of people, we're a bit less confident talking about our own strengths and skills. So sit down maybe with one or two of your friends and try and think of ideas around what you both see as positive in each other and how you can perhaps build that into a personal statement. The thing about taking time as well is remember that your guidance counsellor often will have lots of these statements to read. So you only have one statement to write, but they might have 30, 40, 100 statements to read and to offer feedback in. So make sure you're not handing it to someone right at the last minute and then expecting them to be able to give you the kind of feedback that you'd want to be able to have. In terms of some of the things that you shouldn't do, so I spoke to some of our colleagues in admissions, and we've done this presentation with other universities, and these are things that continuously come up as things that we don't want to see. So don't use cliches. Don't say things too often like, ever since I was a child I wanted to be a doctor, because thousands and thousands of people start off with an opening statement like that, either a cliche or a statement from 2 or 3 people. Apparently, one of my colleagues told me that apparently people like Barack Obama and things are some of the key people that they see as opening statements to personal statements. And as much as that's perhaps true, it's something that lots of people do. So you want to try and stand out from the crowds right from the start. Don't mention individual institutions. As we say, you only have one personal statement to cover all of your options on UCAS. Now, the exception to this would be if you have only applied for one university, which we wouldn't recommend you do, but some students do, then by all means, feel free to mention that individual institution, but generally you should be using one statement for all of your applications, so it shouldn't mention individual institutions. Think about how you structure it. You don't want it to be a sort of chronological history of you from when you were a small child right up until today. So at 6 years old, I first discovered a passion for medicine. Then at 8 years old, I further got excited by medicine. So try to structure it in a way that is not complete like a chronological history of your life to date. Your personal statement is not the time to be funny. Try to avoid using jokes or casual language or trying to sort of just be too informal. It is, as much as we want to see your personality, and your personality might be very funny, and that's a big part of who you are, that your personal statement is not the time for that. So it shouldn't be funny. Try and keep it professional. Try and keep it so that it flows in a way that is reflective of you at your very best. And this is where sometimes I think the balance comes in, while we sort of want you to sell yourself, there is a balance of selling yourself and coming across as, I don't know if this is actually a word that other people use, but it's a very British word, gushy, where it's over flowery, too much flowery language. I genuinely believe that I'm a highly motivated, passionate person. There's sort of 3 areas, so genuinely believe, highly motivated, passionate. You're sort of repeating the same thing there. So, what we would see with that is be quite focused with it. I am a highly motivated person because, and use the words to give us those examples, going back to some of the do's on the previous slide, rather than using up lots of your word count, using lots of words similar to what are there on the screen. Very simple one, don't plagiarize. I know it's really easy to Google, examples of personal statements, or to talk to friends who've also submitted personal statements. A very simple don't is do not use somebody else's personal statement. It should be your own piece of work. and it's your own way of thinking about what you want to study and why. And this one we've added in just in the last couple of years, which is don't write too much about the impact of COVID and the pandemic, unless it is truly relevant to what has happened. Perhaps it's completely changed what you want to study. Again, it comes down to that thing of our admission staff are reading thousands and thousands of these statements. We know that COVID, we know that the pandemic has had an impact on how you've learned. We know that you've had to look at things like online classes. It's changed the dynamic in that sense, but don't focus on it too much. Talk about all the other things that have impacted on your studies today and made you who you are and what you want to study, despite the last 2 years being very difficult. Again, it's a little bit like, don't tell us what we already know. We know that you've had a really tough couple of years in terms of how learning and teaching the exams have been. An example of where that might be relevant is you might want, where you could still reference it is perhaps you weren't thinking about studying, immunology or medicine before. Perhaps you were always going to look at studying something completely different, but you've been inspired to look at a career in the medical field as a result of the pandemic and the impact that it's had. So just be mindful about how and when you mention the last sort of couple of years and the impact of the pandemic. So before I hand you back over to Devesh, I'm going to just show you a couple of examples of statements. So these have been taken from applications that we've had previously. So this is an example of a student. So I'm currently a prefect in my school and I am house captain. I have volunteered at my local hospital and play on the school netball team. I also play the piano. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Clearly a good student, prefect, house captain, they've got some volunteering experience. They play as part of a school netball team, and they've obviously got musical talents as well. It doesn't actually tell us that much, so that's a list of facts there. So if we take you on to the next example, the next slide, this is going to show you how to use similar experience and use it in a way that is much more relevant. So as captain of the cricket team, I have gained good communication skills with my team, and this has helped me understand how important teamwork is for achieving success. I write for the school's monthly newsletter, which has improved my literacy and editorial skills while developing my creativity. This has given me much more confidence and has led me to express my ideas clearly. That is a much better use of similar levels of experience. And actually, they're only talking about two things that they've done. So they're talking about the cricket club and the monthly newsletter. In some ways, you would say being the captain of the cricket team, that doesn't necessarily relate to wanting to study English literature, but they've pulled out how the communication skills that they've gained in that role on the sports team have helped to develop them so far. The previous example actually had much more to say about themselves. They were a prefect, they were a house captain, they had volunteering experience, they were on a number of teams, but they hadn't actually translated it into really good, tangible examples that really showed how that experience that they had would stand them out amongst their other students as well. So there's a couple of examples I say there for you just to show you some good examples and some less good examples. I'm going to pass you over to Devesh, who'll do something similar in showing you how to integrate the academic experience and your extracurricular experience as well.
Thank you, Shauna. Now, with regards to your academic, of course, when you get a chance to write your personal statement, you do have the two big segments that you can cover. So academic, of course, you're studying. You have to show us what impact of the subject is onto your, your personality, as well as how you're using that subject in a beneficial way to gain skills. So like this example says, like economics, sociology has helped me understand and analyze impact of social interactions. At the same time, I have gained valuable data handling skills while researching and observing statistical data to include findings, preparing me for a potential research task. Now, anybody wanting to study economics will have to work with data. So again, the moment you highlight that you've already worked on data and you're comfortable with it, immediately sends a signal to the admissions tutor that you are a right fit for the program. So things like these will really make your application stand out. Another example is about inculcating your extracurricular into your personal statement. So the skills that you have gained, how can you include that? I gained many skills, endurance, stamina above all, having competing team mountain climbing. rambling, and some cave exploration in places such as the Lake District and further north of England. These expeditions have further enhanced my team working skills like cooperation and effective communication and listening skills. The student also goes on to talk about volunteering as well as teaching students mathematics and science, and again, how that has impacted the student. So everything comes down to an activity that you have done. What skills have you gained as part of that activity, and how those skills are going to be eventually helpful for you to pursue the course that you have applied for. If you're able to show this bridge really clearly in your personal statement, that will really make it stand out and give the confidence to the admissions person that you are going ahead and suitable for the role. Now, how do you start writing your personal statement? You've got a lot of do's and don'ts, you've got examples, but how do you go about it? So key thing to identify is the subject that you like to study at the university. So talk to your friends, talk to your parents, of course, talk to your peers as well. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that it is a time and money investment that you're going to do on yourself. The next 3 years or 4 years, you're going to be studying that subject. So you should not come under peer pressure that my friends are going to study management. Let me go ahead and do that myself as well. Identify whether you actually like the subject and choose a subject very wisely. Do some research around it. Talk to your counselor. They know, they've seen you grow, in the school, perform well at your exams. So they would know which subject you're good at, and accordingly, they can guide you as well. After that, write down 2 things that you really like about that subject. For example, if you like science, what is it that you like about science? Do you like the innovation component of it? Do you like that you're inventing something new, or you're discovering something new, or the impact it can have on society? So these are the things, you have to start thinking about yourself. What are the 2 things that you really want to highlight about that subject? And then you have to show us a link that, what could you do with this subject? So portion of your personal statement is, of course, why you're suitable for the program. But we also want to know, what will you do after studying at the university? So where do you want to head after this? So show us a little bit of that as well. Now, again, Shauna has mentioned draft. You have to make a lot of drafts, start early. The key thing here is that once you write your personal statement, you should be able to hand it to a friend and have them read out without telling them whose personal statement it is. And they should be able to pinpoint, yes, this is talking about you. So it should be that personalized that they should be able to immediately pick up, this is the person that I'm talking about. In conclusion of all that we've spoken about, the main thing is to keep it very, very positive. You have to use really positive words in your statement. So talk about passion for the subject, how you feel fulfilled if you study the subject, what kind of collaborations you've done with other people around you, what have you achieved. So use these kind of positive languages rather than negative frame of languages that I wish I could have done that, but I did not have time to do that, or I could have done something more. So don't go into that domain. Rather keep it about what you have achieved, what you are willing to put in, what kind of effort you're willing to put in, and also highlight what you're really passionate about. One example that really stands out to me is about a medicine applicant who had a big passion for baking. Now, he wanted to write about baking in his personal statement, and it was quite, non-linked. So how do you connect baking to medicine? But the way he did it was, he said that when I'm baking a cake and I'm doing the icing, the precision that I'm holding the icing, instrument with is the same precision I'll be holding a scalpel with when I'm working on a patient. So such things will really stand out because these are totally out of the box and very, very personalized. So it's a personal experience of that student that he's linking a skill that he's going to gain from baking to medicine, where he's going to be actually operating on patients. So think about things like these that will really make your application stand out. Now, before we conclude, we just like to give you some useful resources that you can, of course, visit to gain further knowledge that will help you write your statement. UCAS, of course, is a great website. So it has a lot of tips on writing. It has some videos there as well. Do go ahead and look at it. It will also give you pointers about what you should not do, like plagiarism. That's a very big thing. Every statement that is received is run through a software. So there are keywords. If you've copied anything from anywhere, it will be immediately picked out. So do stay away from that. Do also attend webinars like, for example, next unit's webinar. Very informative. You've been here, you've gained a lot of knowledge. So do attend more of these. University website's also updated. So have a look at the program. There's a whole program structure given there. We do also mention about different aspects of the subject that you're going to study. Don't only look at your own subject, but look at the faculty in general as well. Look at the research. Shauna mentioned research universities. So, this is really, really prominent. Every university that's research focused is getting a lot of funding, not just from the government, but also from companies. And that is where the jobs are being created as well. So what you're studying in these universities will help you when you're stepping out for your careers. So do highlight the research in your personal statement as well if you're attracted towards anything like that. You can also look at TED Talks and also look at social media, but do look at them only in terms of inspiration. Do not copy and paste from there. So that would be a piece of advice. So that was us taking you through a personal statement, and we're very happy to take questions.
Superb. Thank you so much, Shona and Devesh, for sharing all of that information. It was a fantastic session, very crisp, to the point, and of course, thanks for sharing all the do's and don'ts while writing the personal statement. To all the students who are here, I encourage you to just note down the email IDs of both these fantastic speakers, and feel free to reach out to them for any questions you have. We are almost coming towards the end of the session. It's almost 7 p.m., but let's take just maybe one question from here. Actually, instead of taking one question, maybe let me just ask both of you one final piece of advice that you would have to give to these students while they're writing their personal statements. Just one crisp advice, please. Okay, Shona, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that the biggest one for me is around spending time on it. It's not an easy thing to do. And I think I would say just give yourself enough time to draft a couple of examples, to reflect on what you've actually achieved and what you want to do. At the same time, what I would say is don't completely stress yourself out over it as well. This is only one part of the application process as well. So, don't spend hours and hours drafting a personal statement if you've got an exam, the next day, because we are looking at your academic experience as well. But it's actually, overall, it's a really worthwhile process to do in terms of, I think, just helping you to really focus about what you want to do and why you want to do it. So try not to think of it as a chore, and think of it as something that allows you to make the right decisions for what you're going to do in the future.
That's absolutely fantastic. Over to you, Devesh.
Thank you, Devesh. So what I would add to that is that just be genuine in your personal statement. It could be intimidating that, you're competing in a class which will have a lot of students, only few can become prefects, only few can go ahead and play good sports. Maybe you don't have those qualifications, but always look at things that you have done or activities that can highlight some skills you have. UK in general will, though work experience is not mandatory for you, but in the UK, we also count voluntary work as experience. So in case you volunteered with, charity or an NGO, you can highlight that because you are picking up skills there. Anything small, even if you're reading a book that is relevant to your subject, is a skill that you're, picking up further knowledge. So do that. Second thing is also be genuine. So do not try and bluff. Because sometimes what universities will do is, though we don't take interviews, but in some cases we may invite you for an interview. And at that point, we'll be looking at your statement and asking you questions regarding it. So in case you have put in something that is incorrect or bluffed about something that is not actually true, it can get caught out there and your application will be rejected. So try and avoid these. And again, like Shona has mentioned, the process of writing a personal statement is very, very important. Don't think of it only as a university application. Eventually, when you're also applying for jobs, you will be writing a cover letter wherein you're introducing yourself. So if you get into the habit now of identifying good skills that you have and how those skills are relevant for an organization that you're applying for, whether for a course or for a job, it will become a pleasure for you and you'll get the practice of it. And also, it'll be something that you look forward to doing.
That's wonderful. Superb. Thank you for that advice, Devesh. And thank you both for presenting this amazing session and for creating that wonderful presentation. It was great to see both of you and learn from you about the UCAS personal statement. To all the students who are here, thank you for joining this evening. Tomorrow we have a next session where we learn about applying to the universities in New Zealand. If you are looking at New Zealand, do come and join that session as well. With that, we can close the session. So once again, thank you, Devesh and Sona, for being here.
Thank you so much for having us, and good luck with your applications.